To Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number 603-236-4730 or by clicking on the website www.watervillevalley.org. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access this meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the Town of Waterville Valley's website at www.watervillevalley.org. C, we're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are issues with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 603-236-4730 or email at townofwatervillevalley.org. D, will be adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. And please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. So we'll start with our roll call attendance. If anybody else is in the room with you, please notify us because that will count as public attendance. And as previously, we'll go alphabetically. So Nancy.
Nancy Knight, member.
Mike. Mike.
I was muted again. Mike Coppell, alternate.
Bill Larson.
Larson, member.
Wendy Rathgaber, member. John. Do not see John Racine. Rich.
Rich Rita, ex officio.
Bill Spence.
Bill Spence, member.
Terry.
Terry Waite, member.
Rob. No Rob. All right, so while you're here, Mike, I'll seat you for John, and let's get this ball rolling. I know a bunch of us have other things to do. Tara, would you mind sharing what you sent around for, maybe if we start with the chart, kind of summarize our conversation and give us
Whirling?
I muted everybody and could still hear it, so. I don't know.
Okay, whatever.
I couldn't find it. Unless it's somebody outside your house, Wendy, doing road work or something.
No.
You're the only one that wasn't muted and we could still hear it.
Oh no, it must be me, but I know my computer is doing something. Sorry.
So I'll just kind of give an overview using the table to get conversation started. And this is still organized how it was when you had your discussions, with the top half being rooms in a dwelling and the bottom half being whole dwelling unit. In each category, we discussed it in kind of tiers, with what feels like just a normal accessory use of a residential dwelling. And then the next tier down in the middle of each table, well, at what level does it still feel like an accessory use of a residential dwelling, but kind of like somebody's running a business out of their home, and now it should have a permit for a home occupation. And then the third row in each part is, well, now it's a full-blown business, so it needs to come in for site plan review. It's a non-residential use. And in the LDR, it's not even allowed. So that's how it's organized. Where it's going to look a little bit different than the table we've been using is, if you decided something was okay without a permit in the LDR, it really needs to be okay everywhere. So these boxes turned into rows that go all across. If renting out one unit in your 2-family residential unit is a home occupation in the LDR, well, shouldn't it be everywhere? So that's how I translated that into the ordinance. And then, so you want to talk about this in halves and then go to the language?
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
To see if people have comments on this, the rooms in a dwelling part, and then the dwelling unit part, and then we can go to the ordinance language.
Yeah, since we've had time to mull over from our previous discussion, does anyone have any thoughts, concerns? Even if it's stuff we've been talking about before, let's make sure we revisit. I'd like to get everyone on the same page if we can.
I had one thought, which is that it's not clear to me that there's a difference between permitted use and allowed use. And if we're going to use the words permitted use, we should define them.
Well, yeah, they're different, because if something needs a special exception, it's allowed, but it's not a permitted use. So not allowed means it's not allowed at all. See what I mean? Let's talk about the bed and breakfast, renting out up to 5 rooms in your home. It's not allowed at all in the under this scenario. It's not allowed at all in the LDR. It is allowed with a special exception in the HDR. In BC, it's just plain permitted. You don't even need a special exception.
Well, I guess my point is, permitted sounds like you need a permit. Why don't we just say allowed?
Because we're being consistent with the rest of the ordinance, Nancy. And you need to go look at the use table that's in the zoning ordinance, where P means permitted.
My point is, the rest of the tables don't make sense either. And if we say permitted, we need to define permitted, because it's not in our definitions. And any human who reads this thinks permitted, oh, I need a permit.
You do, you need a zoning permit from the select board. Absolutely. Versus an accessory use that you don't.
This is a term of art, I think we're
right. What I'm saying is, if it's a term of art, we should define it. It's not in our definition.
Right. It's not permit, it's permit. Those are two different things.
It's used throughout the ordinance right now, and I don't think we're gonna go back and redo the whole ordinance.
Right, but then we just need to define it, because it's not ordinary English. It could be interpreted more than one way.
Okay, this table is just for you, for right now today. And if you decide you want some more language on it for the public hearing, we can do that. I'm happy to.
Yeah, we're thinking this, adding a definition for permitted would clear this up. Right?
Doesn't it already exist in the?
No.
No, it does not. No, it doesn't. Nancy's right.
And if we're using it, if we're using it elsewhere, we need to define it. That's my point.
Yeah, but it is in the ordinance.
Okay, but that's a different issue, I think. As long as we understand what we're talking about in the table in front of us, we could discuss it in those terms. But I think you're absolutely right, Nancy. I mean, if we're missing a key definition throughout the zoning ordinance, then we ought to, as a board, put one in there. But for this exercise, if we can all agree that the P stands for what, Tara? Permit or permit?
Permitted.
To permit, right?
Permitted. You have 3 kinds of uses, as explained in the introduction
Right.
table. You have permitted, you have special exceptions, and you have conditional uses. And you also have accessory uses, you have home occupations, they're all different things.
Right.
Not allowed means it's not allowed as any of those things.
That's clear enough.
Yeah. So for the purposes of our discussion today, I'll keep that in mind. And as we move forward, we can certainly add that definition to make sure everyone who's reading it in the future will be clear as to our intent.
Just so I understand, Tara, what you're saying is the final disposition of this chart is not going to be in the zoning ordinance. It's for our use. It's a worksheet. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, I'm interpreting the P to mean that I need to get a permission from the select board.
That's absolutely true. And if you were looking at the whole zoning ordinance together, that would be absolutely clear. It would be listed with all the other things with the P that tie back to the administrative section.
Right.
You just keep looking at it out of context.
Perhaps instead of saying not allowed, you should say prohibited.
That's another P though.
This is really just for you for right now, so ask your questions about what it means here, but that should really be.
Tara, I agree, but one of the things you have to remember, as I've read both of the things, the table is so much clearer than the actual verbiage. So that I think one of the things that was said last time is that we would really love to be able to find a way to incorporate the table because it is so much easier to understand.
It will be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had agreed.
It's not gonna go in the ordinance like this. We can add language to it and references to different sections of the ordinance and have it be a handout that the town office can give people when they ask about what's allowed and what's not. We can embellish it to make it like after town meeting when we know what's allowed.
But I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here. I feel like we need to make sure we're all on the same page with what we're actually looking to present to the town as opposed to what format it's in.
Okay.
So I don't know if we want to go through it as we did originally, just section by section, but if we start with rooms in a dwelling for transient rental, how does everyone feel with how we have things at this point?
But non-transient.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the first one is non-transient.
In the other table, they were the other way around, but I was trying to get this to go like the lower end, the lower threshold up.
That makes sense. So this would be like seasonal, longer than 1 month rentals. Anyone have any issue with this first square row? We're all engaged.
Looking for the definition. Then I have the Word document, but home occupation.
Oh, we're on the first, let's start with the first one.
Okay.
The first one makes perfect sense to me.
Me too.
It's permitted.
Is everyone good with that?
Use a different vocabulary word.
Yes,
That was just for you, Nancy.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So now let's move on to the second row. Looking at transient, 1 or 2 rooms in owner-occupied residence. How does everyone feel about that being as a home occupation?
Too much like a motel in LDR. I don't think it should be in LDR.
Okay, I'm looking for the definition. Home occupation. It says, a use conducted entirely within a dwelling except for gardening, which is incidental and secondary, to the use of the dwelling for dwelling purposes and which does not change the residential character thereof. And that's the key to it, in my view, is that it does not change the residential character thereof.
But I think, Bill, if you go further into the zoning ordinance changes that Tara has done, it allows this type of activity for up to 90 days. So a resident can rent or offer for rent up to 90 days and still have it fall under this category.
No, that would be the whole dwelling. we're just looking at rooms in a dwelling in this row.
So this is if someone is living in a home, they have whatever, 3 bedrooms, it's just them, they're empty nesters or what have you, and they want to rent out 1 room to somebody
Right.
on a transient basis, less than 1 month.
And that it must be owner occupied.
Yes.
Is that okay, Terry?
Rich, you're muted.
That's not the way I interpret it, but we'll go through and then when we get to those definitions, or when we get to the zoning ordinance, it'll come up and we can discuss it.
Rich, were you talking to your cat or I put you muted?
She's deserted me. I'm by myself now. But no, I was saying that this includes the full spectrum of transient, that's all. Someone wants to rent a room for a long weekend in their house and so forth. But the key is that it's owner occupied.
Yeah.
And we might have some issue with that, but because that sort of is the question becomes then what is owner occupied, but that's a different discussion.
Is there a difference between owner occupied and resident occupied?
The owner is not the resident,
Yeah.
or the resident is not the owner.
No, I understand. We're saying it is owner occupied.
That is what you've been saying.
I understand. No, I understand. The
And
question that
that's common for this level because you're really doing it to let somebody stay in their own home. I mean, most often.
Yeah.
And when somebody rents their home to somebody, they aren't necessarily expecting them to sublet rooms and make money off it.
Exactly. Yeah, in my mind, if a house is constructed with X number of bedrooms, there should be the corresponding amount of parking places there. So it seems to me that renting 1 or 2 rooms, as far as the impact on the neighborhood, shouldn't be any different than having your adult children come and visit.
Except that's not the way zoning is, for example. One of our neighbors has 6 bedrooms.
Well, the home they've got to come get a home occupation permit and show it's not going to change the parking.
Do we have permits for home occupation?
That's one of the proposed amendments. Because people are supposed to, but aren't. And Mark explained Chris is having to chase after them after the fact. So we're gonna articulate that you need one. What we talked about was if it involves customers, clients, where it might trigger more parking.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as it is, just in my humble opinion. But I think we're going to have to go back and revisit what we mean by owner occupied, just to tie that down. But I think I understand the concept, and if we're looking for opinions, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And just back to your point, Mike, you talked about your neighbor with 6 bedrooms. This is specifically 1 or 2 rooms for this row.
Now, I understand the reason I said it is because somebody made the comment that there should be as many parking spaces as there are bedrooms. And I don't think that's our current zoning
Right.
for anything. That's the only reason I said it.
Okay.
No, it's not even close to that.
No.
No, it's usually, I don't remember yours, it's usually 2 spaces a dwelling unit. But again, they will have to come in and show that they have enough parking for this to get the permit.
Okay, so once again, the home occupation requires a permission. That is, you can't just do this without getting
When we
permission
get
from the town.
when we get to the language in the amendment, you'll see something I drafted for you to talk about that would say when you need to come in for a home occupation permit.
Yeah, I don't think we should get hung up on parking because an owner can have several cars in the houses. They can park it on their property. That's going to be their position on the matter. I mean, you could have, if you have adult teenagers, you probably do have more cars than you have quote unquote parking spots for. But you make parking spots.
But what you want Chris to look at is that it's not gonna be people parking on the road.
Exactly. That was my point. Right. They can't right now.
All right, so, Terry, I think, is standing firm on his disapproval for LDR. How's everyone else feeling? I'd like to go through, let's just go through and have everyone chime in on this row. Nancy?
Wait, the home occupation row?
Yeah, the 1 or 2 rooms and owner occupied, yes.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Mike?
I think it's fine.
Bill Larson?
Yeah, I think it's fine, but you know, we're bordering here on how in the world are we ever gonna, we've never done any of these things, ever.
Well, we've never monitored any of these things, but these things have happened.
Wait, right. These things are going on. We just haven't paid attention.
Yeah, so Bill Larson's point is that we don't have any means of enforcement.
Well, yes, and that's where,
Well, we do have means of enforcement. We just choose not to enforce it.
Yeah, okay, we've never executed it and
Yes.
nobody's ever done anything like this. No.
Right.
You
We've not
do,
supervised it.
a lot of it's in a gray area, and
Right.
who would wanna be the first town to go to court over it, or second?
But isn't that the reason that we've decided to talk about this in the first place?
Absolutely.
So anyway, we're making
So-
some progress.
Wendy, I support the way this is written. John's not here. So
I'm here. I'm here.
You're here.
I'm sorry, I came a little late. I'm fine with it.
You're good with
Yeah,
this is home occupation?
yes.
Okay. Rich,
I'm good.
Bill Spence,
I agree.
and Terry, any change of heart since we started this?
Well, just some clarification perhaps. Does this mean that somebody who became very proficient in renting with Airbnb could rent 1 or 2 rooms out of the house for a Monday and Tuesday of 1 week and for Friday and Saturday of 1 week while having a cleaning lady come in on Wednesday and Sunday and continue this on a regular basis?
As long as
180
they're
days.
there in the house, as long as the owner is in the house.
But you couldn't do it for any longer than 90 days.
No,
No.
the 9 days is applicable here.
Right. But they would need to come for a home occupation permit.
Okay, but it would actually be run, it could be run the entire year, 4 days a week as a
The way it-
business?
The way it's written right now,
Then I'm against it.
Would you be,
I'm against it in LDR.
would you be supportive if we were to limit the days for that?
I would reconsider.
Okay.
Limit the days how, Terry?
Well, I don't really know, Mike. I hadn't really given that thought. I originally was against it, but I can see you're all for it, and so I'm trying to be cooperative here.
So in other words, if we said that you could only do it, for example, for 90 days in a year, which makes it, the enforcement even more complex, but that's beside the point.
I would think that 90 days is too much. I would go more with 30 days.
Okay.
90 days across the whole year, you felt was too much?
Yes, I do, because as I say, I just think it seems motelish to me. I think it would be unfair to a neighbor on either side of the house.
Okay. I guess I still disagree, but, you know, we're, just in terms of, you know, thinking as far as how someone could live in a house and have friends visiting, you know, lots of traffic in and out that way. In my mind is similar to renting 1 or 2 rooms, not more than 2 rooms, keeping it at low key.
That's possible, but when you have money as the motive, I think that you're probably gonna have a little bit more traffic.
Well, what we're trying to do is limit our encroachment on the rights of a homeowner, while at the same time protecting the rights of the homeowner by not allowing people to change the character of the neighborhood. I think that's what Terry is saying.
Yeah, I think that HDR is much more appropriate to this type of activity. LDR is kind of a resident, people buy homes because they don't want it to be a business area. They want to be in their homes with other homes.
But it is also their homes, and so they shouldn't be allowed to decide to use their home in that way.
Well, I guess if you're going to have regulations, you should have regulations. If not, then that's fine. I could go without regulations myself. But, you know, I just think that this is one regulation that you should be protecting the neighbors.
Okay, let's say we understand the objection, and then applying the restriction of the number of days under which this could be permitted, and that's not the right word, that the number of days that this activity could go on is limited.
Allowed.
We need to come up with a number.
Yeah, 90 days would keep it consistent with what we're talking about later on.
So I have no objection to adding a 90-day limit to it.
90 days could be the
Well, I'm gonna
comparison.
have to ask a clarifying question. Back on number one, where we say
Number
that
one.
you can rent 1 to 2 rooms in an owner-occupied residence, non-transient. Does that mean that you would not be permitted to rent your place for an entire ski season?
No, this non-transient bill.
It's,
Well, we're talking rooms in a dwelling here.
No, but no.
Well, I
Yeah.
understand, but my fun, can somebody ask me my question? We're not bordering on telling somebody they can't rent their house.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that now.
We're talking about this is non-transient bill. That's long-term.
We're not talking about houses yet. That's the bottom half of the table. We're talking about bedrooms. The owner is still there and they're renting out bedrooms. And if it's for the whole ski season, they're okay in this first sign. That's not people coming and going. If they live there for 10 years, that's okay. If they live there for 3 months, that's okay.
So then they could rent out that room for this, to somebody for the ski season.
Right. Correct.
Fine. Does that answer your question, Bill?
But it raises my fear that, 5 years from now, when we have a completely different planning board, how many people are going to understand this?
Well, because it's non-transient.
If I did a good job, they'll understand it when you reach the law ordinance.
Transient's defined in the zoning now, Bill, and I think that would help to read the definition of transient.
I've read the definitions, and that's the problem I'm having. We tend to skip over definitions when we transient, we just assume we know what it means.
Well, we have,
It says transient, a room, number of rooms, or dwelling unit that is offered for rent in increments of less than 30 days.
yeah, and that's the same definition we've been working with throughout this entire process. Even though it's not officially in our documents now, it's part of what we were looking to adopt.
I think that's why I agree that a separate handout for people is going to be helpful, that like this, but with more detail, and then references to the section of the ordinance after town meeting. If you adopt it, then after town meeting, this could have the references to the different sections of the zoning ordinance in it. I think that would be helpful to the board and Chris and all homeowners, and it could be sent out to homeowners too, as kind of a heads up that if you're not in one of these categories, you're not legal, and maybe you need to go get a home occupation permit.
Can I interject that?
So people aren't caught by surprise.
I know that we talked about transient as 30 days, but actually as someone who's rented out, that's not a meaningful number. Renting is usually done by the week, and so 4 weeks would be 28 days, and that's a much more sensible unit.
My recommendation is to use the language offered for rent in increments of less than 30 days. If you're offering it by the week, not okay.
But what I'm saying is a month is 4 weeks or 28 days, not 30 days, because that takes into account the months like February, and it takes into account that kind of months are 4 weeks, which is 28 days.
However,
So I would just set it at 28 and not 30.
I wouldn't. The point is, I mean, a year-round rental,
People who rent side of things.
a year-round rental is generally paid by the month.
Yes, but it could have a year lease.
Right? And
So
that's
it's
fine.
not a-
That's really not
it's-
non-transient.
Right,
But
so,
we're distinguishing between transient and non-transient. If we want to think about a month is 4 weeks, not 30 days is a nonsensical random.
We're going down another rabbit hole, guys. I'm
That's
I'm
not a
sorry.
rabbit hole. That's a real thing. If you go look
Yeah,
at
but
other places, it's.
I think I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I think all I'm saying is our purpose here is something other. Whether the transient is 28 or 30 is another kind of argument.
31.
We can have that argument. We're trying to determine this chart. I can look at it at 28 days. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with 30 days. The idea is of that limited amount of days in that area. And the same with the word transient. That's why I think we're going down a rabbit hole.
I guess my concern, we're talking about the language in the ordinance before you're even in agreement on the concept. We're looking at the table to see if you're in agreement on the concept. And then when we get to the definition of transient, that's the time to talk about whether it's 30 or 28. But
I think we're all in agreement on line 1. We're everybody but one person's agreement in line 2, and I'm not sure how to think about line 2 to change Terry's opinion of line 2.
Okay, the proposal is still open on the floor to change line 2 by adding a limitation on the number of days. So I propose that we change line 2 to insert a number of days limit. And I don't care if it's 30 or 28.
yeah,
No,
don't,
I think the number of days is what we're talking about later on is 90 limit. The 30 or 28 is a definition of
Well,
transient.
it's up to us to come up with a limit.
if you could just talk about it in months right now, and then talk about the days when we go to the language of the amendments. This is not the amendments. This is just the concept behind them.
I would say that more people would want freedom to than freedom from. That's my guess. And so I am still for not limiting the number of days that we could have a home occupation of renting out your one room. I don't know about other people, but I don't see my neighbors' driveways. And I would say most of my neighbors don't see their neighbors' driveways. So I don't really see the problem in LDR.
It does depend on the time of year.
Right.
I think Terry's objection was that if the rental of 1 or 2 rooms in line 2 changes the character of the neighborhood, that would be unacceptable.
But is it also unacceptable to tell someone who owns a home how they can use their home?
Yes.
I think that's worse than limiting your neighbors. I really do. I think we should go the other way and allow people to do this.
You do prevent them from doing a lot of things at home. This is just another one.
Right. Of course we do. That's what zoning is all about.
All right, well, it seems like,
I have 4 minutes.
I have to leave now, but I guess I have to just make a strong request to not limit this. This is something that you're actually doing inside your home. The cars will be parked in your driveway or garage. They can't be parked on the street, and the people will be inside your house. And so it seems like an invasion of your personal privacy to not let you do this.
thank you, Nancy.
Have fun, Nancy.
Yeah, I'll try to pick this up on my phone while we're driving, but I might not be able to.
Have fun, Nancy.
Be safe. So
So it sounds to me as if we're leaving it the way it is.
I think the majority of the board is in favor of it, how it's written. I really would love to have consensus, but sorry, Terry. If we have just one outlier, I'm not sure we can spend.
I would expect nothing less.
All right, so why don't we move on? This is going to be a bigger discussion yet. The bed and breakfast.
First question I have is we are defining a bed and breakfast as 5 rooms or less.
Yes.
So anything over that is a motel
Yes,
Or an
Okay.
inn.
or an inn. Yeah, we are right.
lodging.
So it is some other word.
A
It's gonna
lodging
be lodging.
facility.
If I have my way, it's gonna be lodging facility.
Yeah, I like that.
It covers all of those things.
That's fine. I have no problem with that definition.
Why would you let an owner of a single-family home in LDR not do this? That seems like an invasion of privacy.
Because they're turning the home into a business.
You are on the line above as well.
Not by our definition. I
You see-
know, that's circular, Terry, I know.
Yeah, and my point is, all the, 2 rooms, it seems to be fair to everybody, and it's not gonna change the nature of the neighborhood, but 5 rooms all of a sudden does. It just seems like strange.
And that's why you're not allowing it, but
No, Terry's saying that he thinks that these are parallel paths.
not.
The concept's the same, we're just limiting the rooms.
Yes.
Right. But I think that's important. You get more than 2 rooms and it's gonna have an effect on the amount of parking. It's gonna have an effect on the amount of traffic. That's why we kind of said 1 or 2 rooms previously.
What do you say about 3 or 4?
I would say anything over 2. That's why we said 1 or 2 and the 2 above it. I have 1 minute. Or actually 2 minutes.
But you're eliminating 5 rooms, but you're not saying anything about 3 or 4.
It's up to.
It says up to. In other words, you can have up to 5 rooms as a bed and breakfast. A bed and breakfast, you're also probably going out there and advertising in a different way than you are on the 2 above.
It would also pick up it's not the owner, but a renter or a manager.
Yeah.
They wouldn't, if they had 2 rooms, they wouldn't get to be in this category. They'd have to be in this category. It couldn't be in the LPR.
Terry?
I hear what you're saying.
But I mean, on this road, Terry, are you okay with it as it is? I mean, because what we're really doing is re-litigating the previous Rowe's argument.
Oh my God, I'm good.
Yes, I'm okay with it not being allowed. I'm okay with it to be a special exception in HDR. I'm fine with it. The fact that it's not allowed in LDR is fine with me.
So everybody's okay with this, Roe?
So we're good with the bed and breakfast as it's written.
I'll move down real quick, like,
No, I unfortunately have to go. I'm sorry.
We still have,
Thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everybody.
see ya.
Okay.
All right, so now with these, we're looking at the entire unit. So this first line in the second section, what do we have for thoughts?
My thought on this is that when you say 90 cumulative calendar days, now that tells me that if I offer it for 4 days a week, that this could go up to this could extend over a half-year period. Am I reading that correctly?
Over a half-year period, you mean over half of a year? Is that what you said?
In
Sorry.
4-day increments.
if that's
Yeah.
all you're offering it.
Well,
Yeah, say you were very proficient at the Airbnb, and you said, I'm offering this for Monday and Tuesday and for Friday and Saturday of every week. Now, that would accumulate to about a half year by the time you get to 90 days of being offered. Is that what we
That would be
mean?
200 days.
Yeah, is that what we mean?
But we're saying 90, not 200.
It says
The
it's
answer to
being,
Terry's question is yes.
yeah, see what I'm saying, Tara, is if I'm offering it for Monday and Tuesday and for Friday and Saturday of every week, but by the time I accumulate the 90 offered days, the span of time is, pushing a half year.
Right, and after that, you cannot. After you hit the 90-day mark, at the 6-month period or thereabouts, then you would not be allowed. Is that what you're asking, Terry?
Yes, I want to understand, make sure that that's what we intended.
Okay,
The reasoning there is to discourage somebody from buying up homes in order to put them on the Airbnb market, so that you still have your residential feel of your neighborhood, because 90 days is likely to be a deal breaker financially for them to do that. But it would still let somebody who's there one season rent it out for the other season.
Right.
I would object to this as well, because it means that place could be rented effectively for half a year, and the neighbors would be dealing with that the entire summer.
is that what's going on now?
I don't think that's the case right now, not that I'm aware of. I'm talking about LDR only.
Is there a number of days where you feel like that would not be an issue, or you just feel like an LDR is off the table?
I just think in LDR, it's just not the right thing.
So you're gonna tell someone who owns a home who doesn't use it for a couple of months that they cannot rent it for a weekend, no matter what?
Right, I think long-term rental's a different story, and just like I would tell them they can't have a barber shop or a real estate office in their home, they can't do this as well.
Can they not have a real estate office?
Not an LDR.
Looking at our home occupation.
Oh, we're talking accessory here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, what's everyone else's thoughts on that? Having a single family home. Well, how about an HDR? Why don't we start with that? HDR and BC. short-term rental for the entire dwelling in HDR or VC. What are everyone's thoughts on those?
Well, both of those you have, what did you call it, Tara? Lodging units, or what's the term you want to use?
Lodging facility. Yeah.
Lodging facilities, right?
Yeah.
They do exist, certainly in VC. Do they exist in I mean, I guess I would say yes to accessory use across all three. Is that your question, Wendy?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just trying to single out and find some consensus on the other.
I would think that one of the premises of buying a condo is that you could rent it.
I agree.
For the record, I think we're going to hear from a couple condo board members when we have our planning board meetings. They've approached me that they're looking for some regulation for HDR because they're feeling like they need some assistance from the town in helping control the Airbnb-ness happening in condo associations. But that's neither here nor there for a discussion tonight, just as a heads up. But it's in the more in the character is, I think, what I'm hearing you guys say for HDR to have the dwellings rented on a short-term basis.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's fine in HDR, VC, and C1.
Okay. John, you've been quiet there. I'm gonna pick on you.
Sure. So my thoughts about all of this is we're not just in a regular town, we're in a resort town. So we got to kind of think of it a little bit differently. But my final answer would be, yes, I agree with it the way it is.
Okay. So that was just focusing on the HDR through C1, so HDR, VC, C1.
Right.
LDR is where we're getting stuck.
It's still the same thought in my head. I mean, and that's what we have Tara for. She sees all of these different towns plus resort towns. And I'm assuming this is your recommendation, Tara?
No, this is what I helped you come up with over the last couple of months. It's not really for me to recommend what you feel is okay in your different neighborhoods.
Well, let me turn it. Go ahead, John.
So I'm sorry. So I'm going to just kind of muddy the waters a little bit and ask what your thoughts are, Tara.
I mean,
what you would recommend. You said no to this?
It's different in every town. I mean, that's why when we started the conversation, I gave you a blank table, all the different combinations, and you discussed and landed on some consensus of what made sense in each of the different categories, each of the different zoning districts. And this is where you landed.
Right, but tell me, you must work with some other towns that are resort towns, yes? No?
Yeah, people are just, most towns are still at the point you are of trying to figure this out, and
Okay.
there aren't really a lot of examples yet. You'll probably be an example that people follow. Some towns have approached it with a business permit, and a couple have gone like super detailed and micromanagement, like Hanover talking about hosted this and non-hosted that, and yeah. And so there's only a few examples, and they're all over the place. And again, I helped you decide what made sense in each of these categories, and this is where your consensus was.
Okay.
And I think that where you're at now, my understanding is, if you have, I think you're trying to find out if you have enough consensus to go to a public hearing soon, or you had left the door open to keep talking about it for the following town meeting. So I think that's what this meeting is like. Do you have enough consensus to have a public hearing in December or not. And maybe you need to talk about more in December and could still squeak in a public hearing in January to see what other people think. There's not really a time, I don't think you really set a time limit for yourself on this.
Mhm.
Right, there are some members of the board who are pushing for this to go quickly, and I don't want to rush this if we're not in agreement.
Right.
Right, sure, yeah. I hear you.
One of the reasons that we started this discussion in the first place was Airbnb. So what is the Airbnb-ness? That is, how do you define Airbnb?
You don't. It's a company where people market all of these different things on this table.
Okay, I'll change the.
You have a lot of them.
Airbnb behavior.
You have a lot of them right now. And I think the one reason to think about trying to get it into this town meeting is that you're probably gonna have even more by the next time. And then you have all these people that aren't really grandfathered because they weren't really legally doing it, but it's the norm, and I think the longer it sits, it's just gonna be a bigger mess.
Oh, no question about that. I agree entirely with it. What I'm trying to do is, ask this group to say if it's Airbnb behavior that's objectionable, how are we going to define it such that we can stick it into one of these categories and come up with satisfactory results?
Well, it's transient that we're talking about, and objectionable is,
I guess I thought that's what you were doing the last few meetings.
Yeah, I agree. But
Okay.
like objections are being raised, in particular in LDR.
Well, I'm not sure who is objecting to what. Perhaps, Wendy, you could poll us on this particular row and see where people stand.
Yep, absolutely. Let's run through. Nancy, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Which row are we on? The short-term rental dwelling unit, first row?
Yes.
First row, yes. Yeah.
Not fair, you have sun.
Okay, seems fine to me. I have no objections.
Okay. Next one, Bill Larson.
I don't really have an objection to the concept.
Okay. Wendy, I'm in support of it. I think an owner of a property ought to be able to have some discretion of how they use their property. John?
I think I'm fine with it.
Rich?
I'm okay with it.
Bill Spence?
Yes. But,
Okay. I'm sorry, was there a but?
well, I'm looking at the 90 days and saying if there's, anyway, I'm having a lot of difficulty defining Airbnb behavior.
Well, it's transient behavior. It's the offer to rent less than 30 days. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we shouldn't use Airbnb because you can rent longer term for Airbnb. We rented an apartment for 4 months from our son in San Francisco on Airbnb, so that's irrelevant. We're talking about short-term rentals.
Yep.
Right, but it's the behavior that is associated with, I'm just using the brand name Airbnb to try to define what the objectionable behavior is.
So you're talking about the behavior of
I
the,
define what the term of rental is. It's not what I said.
so you're, so is your concern that if it's an accessory use, there's no way to help monitor the behavior of the people renting? Is that your concern?
Yes,
Okay.
it's the change of the character of the neighborhood, which is, I think, was what started this discussion in the first place.
Okay, so you're yes, but not really.
I'm saying if there's a number that can be applied, and one of the things that makes regulation manageable is numbers. So is it 90 days? Is it excessive? Would 60 days improve the assessment?
I would say, Bill, that some of us have already accepted 90 days. Perhaps we can finish at 90 days and see where we are at.
Okay.
And then if maybe we can change a number if we want to achieve consensus on a number, if there's an objection on the number.
All right, so then I'll say yes and we proceed. And where's Terry when I need him?
Yep. Terry's our last person as we're going through the list.
He's not there.
You're muted, Terry.
It was 0, I think.
You probably prefer that I be muted.
No,
I'm against it in LDR. I accept, I think it's fine in HDR, VC, and C1.
And are you still sticking with the business definition for the reason no, or what?
I just think it's changes the nature of the neighborhood. I think it's becomes a business. When you're talking short-term rental, there are certain processes and certain things that go along with short-term rentals that don't belong in a residential neighborhood. HDR, I think, is fine because I think that, like you said, the condominium owners are used to renting out their units. It happens all the time, and sometimes they buy it with that in mind. So I think it's more appropriate in HDR, and certainly in VC and C1, I have no problem with it at all. But it just is not the nature of LDR. I don't think it belongs.
And no amount of days.
Suppose we changed it to, that you have to apply for permit to do it. So that you'd have to demonstrate that you can control whoever it is that's coming to rent the place in the short-term basis.
I don't think that solves the problem, Bill. It still would change the nature whether there's a permit or not. And they may think they can control it and all that, but it's just not the right thing for the LDR.
This may be one of the toughest. I'm sorry, Wendy, you were going to say something?
Oh, just going to ask if the number of days makes any difference to your thought process, Terry.
If I was staked out and threatened with my life, possible that I might go with some sort of a number of days, but I prefer right now to say just don't allow it at all.
We're coming over to your place now, Terry. Who's got the stakes? Well, this may be one of the tougher ones. Just thinking ahead, in the sense that, does anybody have a feel for if this is going on, like people renting their houses, and we're going to completely now prohibit that? In other words, renting their houses is that going to be really doable? My sense is that it's happening, but in a transient sense. But I don't have any proof of that.
Well,
I think David did it.
Not to use a company name, but just go on Airbnb and search for Water Valley, and you'll see what's being.
Okay, so it is happening, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would be prohibiting something that's going on that's illegal anyway.
You're trying to find the right balance so that
Exactly.
you allow some of what's going on.
Right, no, that's what I think we're trying to do, but I think Terry's position would prohibit what is now going on illegally.
Yeah.
Okay.
But is it mostly involving condominiums that we're talking about? I mean, when you go check with Airbnb, do you find out a massive number of single-family homes that are used?
I saw some of each. I looked when we started the conversation, and I saw some of everything.
Yeah, there are definitely single-family homes.
I think the answer to your question, Terry, is that they're typically 3 or 4.
Nancy, you're trying to interject something?
Yeah, are we talking about paid short-term? Because, one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people think about maybe is, there's also things like home exchanges where, say, you want to go to somewhere in France, so you find there are plenty of places online where you can switch homes with a family for a couple of weeks. Is that under this rubric of short-term rental?
Right now, the language that's in the draft for discussion is offered for rent.
Well, but does rent mean for money? Do we define that?
No, we don't. And this is just a draft.
And-
They don't.
And I would say if I'm allowed to do house switching, why wouldn't I also be allowed to just rent my house for 2 weeks to pay for my 2-week vacation where I stay somewhere in France? I guess I just don't understand why I couldn't do it as a homeowner. You know, I feel like this is infringing on my homeowner rights. You know, I mean, it's one of these balances of freedom and freedom from, and I'm uncomfortable forbidding it.
Great point, Nancy.
But one of the reasons that we have this 90 days in there is that where it becomes objectionable, if somebody's doing this on a regular basis such that it starts to look like a business.
We're owning
Right.
a home just for that, buying up 5 homes to do this.
But if you did
Right,
it
so 90
once
days
in a
is
while,
perfectly reasonable.
but Nancy's analogy is when once in a while I do this because I make an exchange or I take in some income for a 2-week period because I take a vacation somewhere else. That, you know, if we were trying to prohibit that, that would be encroaching upon the rights of the homeowner. However, if the homeowner is doing this on a regular basis for the purpose of making money, that is, if his property is being advertised consistently, and that's the term offered, if it's always out there offered, then I think that there's a legitimate objection to that. It's changing the nature of the neighborhood.
Yeah. So I have to go, but thanks, Bill. That sounded great.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're my best critic, Nancy.
So the 90 days, is that something we need to look at more carefully? Because I definitely appreciate Nancy's point about restricting what someone can do with their own home.
Yes.
I believe the way it exists right now, it's not allowed anyway. Am I correct on that?
Correct. Unless somebody, I mean,
Question that interpretation. You know, why is it prohibited now?
it's in a little bit of a gray.
Everybody does it.
That's the gray area.
No, it
I'm
is.
happy to answer that. It's a little bit of a gray area. At some point, when so many people are doing the thing, they could go to court and argue that it's a normal, typical accessory use of a dwelling. If they've bought the home just to rent it, they're going to lose in court because that's a business. That's not a normal accessory use of a residential dwelling. That's where we've had one court case that drew that line and made that line clear.
Okay.
I mean, I think we could, and I am one of those hoping to move forward for this town meeting. I think we could move forward. I mean, we're going to be discussing in a couple public hearings this 90-day, and we'll get a feel for it. But it's the concept of balancing the rights of homeowners and of homeowners in both senses, both those who want to rent their place for short periods of time and those who live next to abutters happening. And I'm fine. I don't want to get hung up on the number 90. I mean, it's a balance we're trying to find. Maybe we end up, we land on 60, or maybe we keep it at 90. I don't know, but the idea of balance, I think, is important, and I would offer that in an effort to move forward. I mean, I think we have agreement by everybody, perhaps except Terry, that we're okay with it as is to move forward.
Yeah. And we can suss out the details when we get feedback from the public hearings.
That's how I see it.
Yep, that sounds reasonable. So should we move on to the next row?
Move on.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Any other short-term rental offered? Sorry, Tara, any other short-term rental? What did that language mean?
No, we're in the row above.
You're on this, right?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right.
Wait, but any other means not this or this.
Okay. So short-term rental, 1 unit in a 2-family, right, residential unit for more offered,
This is the in-law apartment kind of building.
right. So that is we're taking the opposite swing, that they can be offered for more than 90 days,
Right.
as long as the owner is there.
They could put the accessory dwelling unit in order to have the money to pay their taxes.
Right.
The home occupation.
You know, this is a longer term definition.
Yeah.
And it's moving away from the Airbnb characteristic behavior.
Why don't we say short-term instead of Airbnb?
Okay.
But Bill, it's not necessarily. This could be rented weekends year round.
Right, it's still transient, it's just more than,
Okay, then we've got to interpret the more than 90 days referring to not one rental incident or contract.
Yeah, that's all clear when you're reading the actual language of the amendment,
Okay,
which this is how long you could offer it. And again, it's because you're trying to make it to give disincentive from somebody from buying a property just to put it on that market. You know, so you're not losing affordable homes if it's actually a dwelling unit.
yeah, cumulative.
okay, so what are our thoughts here? This is owner occupied for transient for potentially 365 days. 360 days.
Mhm.
Should we go down? Or is everyone still digesting a little bit?
Well-
Seems okay.
The trouble with regulations is you'll always find somebody who will determine a means of circumventing the regulation.
Yep.
And that if you wanted to prevent someone from using the mother-in-law apartment as a short-term rental money-making proposition, this box doesn't do it.
No, as long as they live there, that's okay.
Right.
This goal is trying to let them if they live there.
But if you're trying to limit or say eliminate the type of behavior that we've been discussing, then this box doesn't limit it.
It doesn't. Your reasoning was that if the owner is in the other unit, so that type of behavior isn't gonna get out of control.
Yeah, but if that's the purpose of if the owner thinks that this is perfectly good use of his mother-in-law apartment, then these restrictions wouldn't change the behavior we're trying to eliminate.
I'm not trying to eliminate any behavior per se.
Well, I'm having difficulty defining the advertising that you see in the paper for, I want to rent a piece of a building, a piece of an apartment. I want to use it regularly to make money, i.e. I'm treating it as a business rental. I think that's where the real difficulty is in trying to define how these regulations are worded. Bill Larson, are you still there?
Here. And I am struggling with all of these definitions and the rest. I mean, I don't think the average citizen is going to understand this at all, and it's just going to ignore it.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah,
I strongly disagree.
I think you're gonna need to do some outreach, and as I said, I think doing a mailing after.
Mhm.
I was trying to find you, Wendy.
I know, sorry, my internet just completely crapped out here. I'm resetting it, but I'm on my phone right now. Sorry, everyone.
But I think if it passes, if you propose it and it passes, you will want to do a mailing that refers homeowners to the new sections of the ordinance. In my mind as a planner, and I couldn't care less where a community lands on any of these things, but what bothers me as a planner in the silence of it is that if somebody is a good law-abiding citizen and they come and ask if they can do it, they're told no, and they don't do it. But then there's other people who just say, well, I'm just gonna do it and let's see if they do anything about it. And that just creates an inequity.
I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission.
No, but that also creates a legal liability for the town.
That's true, but I can't think of a regulation that doesn't put something in the situation the same.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow, Terry.
Any regulation gives you the same situation where someone who is law abiding will go by the regulation. Someone who wants to do it regardless will do it anyway. It's not just limited to short-term rentals. It's almost any regulation.
Oh, sure.
That's true, but this has gotten so common that I think that's why you wanted to try to address it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know,
We're not really getting a lot of complaints about this, are we?
No idea.
I don't know. Mark?
Well, but it's not an issue of complaints. It's an issue of cleaning up our zoning and thinking forward. Lee, sorry, put that well, but you know what I mean.
I'm trying to make it legal for some of the people that are doing it.
Right.
Yes.
And look at 5 years, you know, we know what's happened with COVID. What's going to happen 5 years from now if something else happens, you know, let's at least all be on the same page.
Again, I just like to get off to this particular row. I mean, I think I understand the concept. I'm not sure I understand what the objection is to the concept of allowing people who have two-family residential unit to offer short-term rental.
Well, I don't think there's any problem with a long-term rental, but the fact that it's a short-term rental, it becomes the same as all the other short-term rentals in LDR, whether it's
LDR, okay.
The question to Mark was, are there any objections? Have objections been flowing in to the short-term rental problem?
Or to the noise created by people doing short-term rentals?
Well, I can't say that they're related specifically to the short-term rentals, but we certainly are seeing more of an issue with noise complaints. Sorry. We are definitely seeing more complaints with regards to noise throughout town. But that's a function of just more people being here than there have been in the past. You know, I can't put my finger on exactly what's causing that.
Okay.
So, have we landed where we landed on the other categories with Terry, with you objection to any short-term rental in LDR, but are fine with in other zoning areas? Is that where we're at?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. For you, I mean, I guess I'm wondering what the other folks think.
Yeah, so we'll go down through the roll again with this second line under dwelling units. Fewer of us to go through, but
We're dropping like flies.
we are. Bill Larson, what are your thoughts on the second line here under dwelling units?
I can live with it.
Okay. Wendy, I'm in support of it. John,
I think I'm okay with it.
you think?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
And you only have to be okay enough to have a first public hearing.
Right, exactly.
True. Rich,
Okay with it.
Bill Spence,
okay with it with respect to the objective that we're going ahead to the first public hearing.
This is another okay with it, but, isn't it?
No, it's not allowed.
I have a personal objection that is if I were doing this myself, I would eliminate LDR in this second row box. I don't think it solves the problem. But I'm with I support the idea of taking this to the public.
Okay. Terry?
I am okay with it except for it LDR.
Okay. But overall, it does sound like we're all feeling like moving forward will be okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the final line under dwelling units. Any other short-term rental offered for more than 90 cumulative days?
Terry, you gotta like this one, please.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Woo-hoo.
Hooray.
Good man.
How about everybody else? Good. Phil Spence? Rich?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, like, yeah.
Bill Larson?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say the same thing over and over again.
That's okay.
What's the regulation looking for a problem?
I'm just, it's overwhelming to me that this language, this verbiage is gonna correct the problem.
I understand.
So if I'm following the conversation right, we have that Bill thinks these are too strict and Terry thinks they're not strict enough. So, and everybody else is in the middle, that maybe you landed on the right place.
Right, to go forward to a public hearing and see what the people think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think that will be very informative to find out what everyone else in town thinks.
I think the very important thing is that we're addressing this issue and putting it in front of the people.
Yeah.
They're doing something about it.
Okay. All right.
So if you're still thinking about the December 9th hearing, we need to go on to the language.
Yep.
And then I would need to write it in actual amendment form for Mark. Mark, what, just in case that happens, what's, you're still there somehow. The rest of your schedule for the week would be good to know. Nick or Mark or Fun.
You need to know my schedule for the rest of the week?
Or the town office schedule. If the board goes ahead and wants to have the December 9th hearing, when do I need to get you the stuff this week to get it?
We'll be here on Friday if you get it to us.
Okay, good.
We're all day on Wednesday and we'll be here on Friday.
Great. That's all I needed to know.
Okay. Sorry, hold on. All right?
Perfect.
Good.
so Tara, John here, would that be, my question is, would that be so that the people can see this prior to the meeting?
Oh, yes. If you're going to have a public hearing,
Okay,
I need to be able to write this into amendment. We'll go through the text that I sent out, but I would write it in amendment form, and that's what you have the public hearing on.
okay, thank you.
We don't have to adopt the amendment ahead of time?
No, all you're doing is voting to have a first public hearing and see.
Let's see where it all lands.
You know, and in something that might be controversial, the less you're married to it, the better when you get your first public hearing. So let's go ahead. I will put up the text.
Yep.
But I've gotta move you guys out of the way so I can. So the changes would be in 3 places. They'd be in the definitions, the use table, and the home occupation section. I gotta get you guys out of my way here, so.
Can we take a stab at this permitted problem?
I don't know that I could do that by Friday.
I'm gonna do it ever.
It would mean going through the whole ordinance. So I would say I can't do that by Friday. If you decide to have a second hearing, I probably could do it in time for the second hearing.
Why don't we wait and see what the first hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's your
Right.
schedule?
But yeah, I couldn't do it, but I am taking Thanksgiving off.
You should, and you
So
should.
So I could not do it. I have a full week already, so.
Understood.
So one of the things in definitions, you asked for, I had stuffed this in accessory building, but you wanted to break it out and have a separate definition for accessory use. So this is my first draft of that.
Conversation.
And I would wrap, whatever you end up with as an accessory use in the table, in here, because I think we want to articulate these things in a couple of places.
Good.
Yeah, I think this looks good.
This is what I came up with for a bed and breakfast definition. And I changed this a little bit. You guys, at the end of that meeting, it said may offer breakfast only for guests, and I couldn't live with that, so I made it be exclusively.
That's good.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yes, because otherwise you're.
Right. I went through and cleaned up this, had hotel, motel, lodge, inn in different places, and then this thing called an accommodation unit that really could have been a home or a condo and so I went through the ordinance to try to make it so we're talking about not the design of the space, but the use of the space.
Yeah, I thought this was good.
Yeah.
And again, this, whatever you land on for the home occupation for these would be in a couple of places, just to help people understand it.
Right.
I don't usually like to have regulations and definitions, but I think this is one use case where we need it because we're talking about a business use of a residence, so it's just kind of blurry. And more we clarify it, the better. So I took hotel out. We're not going to talk about hotels or inns. We're going to talk about lodging facilities.
Yeah, I like that.
Tara, I'm wondering, the way you written it here is a building or group of associated buildings where rooms or units comprised of bedrooms, bathroom, living area, with or without kitchen. Some sort of rough lodging, like a lean-to or a cabin that doesn't have a kitchen or something like that, could still be used for lodging. So is there a reason why you've described those rooms that way instead of just saying rooms?
No, there isn't. And I was trying to say it might be rooms or it might be a unit that has these other rooms in it, like, because it might be a condo unit. If we could, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that's a good point, because it might be yurt, right?
A yurt.
So it could be
No,
sheltered.
I've got another town where there's a site plan coming in for, it's gonna be like tents on platforms and
Glamping.
Glamping.
glamping, that's it.
Glamping.
Do you want this change to be able to fit that?
I think to just say rooms or units and you don't have to explain what they're comprised of because it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You
Or
think-
should,
I'm fine with that if you think it's clear. But one of you is gonna ask what units means, I know.
I think so.
I did look it up, and you you have dwelling unit defined, so perhaps that's what it means.
Perhaps you could just say, make this as in a list of examples, and then it's not exclusive. Would that help, Terry?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that, Rich.
I'm trying to get at what we mean by units, we say, for example, but not exclusively, the following, something like that.
Comprised but not limited to.
I don't think it's necessary, and I think when you start listing things, I mean, the idea is that if it's not mentioned, it's prohibited. So I think you're better off to just say rooms, even if you don't say units.
Okay, so you'd want to get rid of units. We were trying to define units, I guess.
Oh, I think you need that because it's, you know, it could be the condotel, right?
right.
You're saying it could consist of more than one room, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it might be the apartment.
I see.
But,
Yeah, people could think of a unit as a single rental, right?
right?
As a multi-room unit.
Well, that still doesn't get the urine.
Glamping.
How about shelter?
That's okay. Yeah, shelters would cover it.
One's group of rooms or other shelter.
Thinking in terms of rustic cabins, perhaps.
That would have no facilities, I guess, is where you were going with that, Terry, right?
Yeah, it could have a porta potty out in the backyard.
How's this?
Yeah, that looks good.
Sure.
Yeah, I like that term.
I'm hungry. Everything looks good now.
All right, we'll get rid of this page that says restaurant on it then. We're getting rid of motel. Short-term rental, I made that a use, and so it needs a definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is it.
And we talked about, at an earlier meeting, this is what transient had come up with for a definition.
2 S's and less.
Yeah.
And I think, based on Nancy's input, I'm wondering if we should say, besides correcting the typo, I'm wondering if we should say less than 1 month.
That mean a month could be 28 to 31 days.
Great. I think that was, because this is what we're trying to say. It's not a weekly rental. It's not a daily rental.
Or do we say for less than 4 weeks?
I wouldn't do that
Okay.
because you're still really trying to be it's not a short-term rental. You don't. Yeah. I would say less increments of less than a month. You need to rent it by the month for it not to be transient.
Okay.
This down here was just a correction that I could see there was some confusion about the way this had been written before.
Why do you have to put in here that neither unit is required to be owner occupied? That's confusing when you go back to the table and you find out what has to be occupied and what doesn't.
Yeah, I was trying to make it more clear. The reason we had this in there was that state law lets you require one to be owner occupied. In this accessory dwelling unit, you can require the owner live there all the time, but you decided not to. So we needed some way, I guess, to say that, but maybe we could just be silent on it. Maybe you don't.
I think it's conflicting when somewhere else you say that it must be owner occupied.
Yeah, maybe it's not really clear. Let me highlight it, and if I can't think of a reason it needs to be in there at all, let's just take it out.
That makes sense.
Sure.
Agreed.
That's the last in the definitions. And then I'll go on to the table. And I divided these into what kind of felt like the residential uses, these two that are where it looked and felt like the accessory use for a home, and it's still residential, it's not a business. So I put them in this category under residential. It's a little arbitrary, but best I could do.
P here stands for what?
Sorry?
P stand for.
We can go to the, this is the explanation to the table where P is permitted and allowed by right. It doesn't mean you go get a zoning permit, and then there's special exception, conditional use, accessory.
I don't have to tell you how I feel about these.
But right, this is, we're assuming the table that we just went through is the thing, and now how do we put it in this is the question. So this is what you've already had the conversation about.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the category that, well, they looked and felt more like businesses, so I have them under commercial.
Tara, why isn't H just short-term rentals? Why do you have to include for more than 90 cumulative calendar days?
Because you're considering allowing less than 90 as a home occupation. And I dealt with that in another place. Up to 90, come in and get site plan review.
So in HDR, you have it permitted for a short-term rental offered more than 90 cumulative days.
That's what's in the table that we've been working, the matrix that we've been working with. That was the last row in the matrix that we had up.
But according to this, if it's less than 90 days cumulative, it's not permitted.
It's home occupation.
We don't list every home occupation in this table. We talk about those other places.
But it is up in the residential where you put it in, short-term rental offered for no more than 90 cumulative calendar days. That's, if there wasn't the residential and commercial separation.
I don't know exactly right now, Wendy. I'm reading it and it brings a question to my mind. So I'm sure it would to somebody else as well, reading it to find out whether something's legal or permitted or not.
I think that's why we're gonna need this separate handout that then references the sections of the zoning ordinance when you're done. If you propose it to town meeting and it passes, I agree, you're gonna need this separate handout that says, if you wanna do this, here are the sections of the ordinance you need to look at.
This is the commercial section,
Yeah,
Right.
so it's non-applicable to LDR.
Right, there's nothing commercial that you're gonna
Right.
to LDR.
Let me ask the question here. In HDR, don't we have units that are offered for rent? For transient people, for more than, they're offered every day of the year.
Yeah, and you're gonna clarify that that's okay. It's not okay yet. This would clarify that it's fine.
Well, it would, except that it's got the 90 days, 90 cumulative calendar days.
For more than.
More than.
So we're saying if I own a condo and my intention is to just rent it to someone, I can or cannot offer it for more than 90 days.
You can.
You can rent it either as a short-term rental or as a long-term rent.
Right.
Because it's defined as short-term rental offering. So if it's under 90 or more than 90, it's okay.
Does that make it clear, Bill?
No, but it's probably just me.
I'd hate to be the one that has to explain what this means at the public hearing.
If you own a
No,
condo, you can rent it, depending on your homeowners association regulations.
Bill, I have to agree with you. It's a little confusing to me as well.
Yeah, I think we'll use the matrix that you've been using at the public hearing to explain it.
Well, it would make more sense than if you just took out the restriction of the 90 days. Short-term rental offered in HDR, et cetera, is permitted. It's allowed. Try to avoid that word.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd have to think about that in the context of all the other pieces and how it hangs together. Not sure.
Yeah, but that's a good point, Bill. If there isn't a restriction, then why put the 90 days in?
Well,
Except
because
differentiates.
it's blank, it's not permitted. It's not allowed if it's blank. And I think you need to show that it's not allowed in LDR.
Right, because you can do short-term rental
Right.
in LDR.
For less than 90 days, right? Okay. Yeah, that's why I wonder if perhaps they shouldn't be listed together, like side by side, one after the other.
Or just in a table, a separate handout, maybe. So you can keep the integrity of the zoning categories as is.
Yeah.
To bring commercial now.
I don't want to see you put another table in the ordinance. We certainly could make a new category in the use table for transient use of residential units or something like that. If you want to put them all together, that's easy enough.
That might really allow people to pinpoint when they're looking for clarification.
Yeah. It might not. It's not going to have all the home occupation pieces yet, but because then the table's all kind of different. But I don't know. I think the companion sheet is the key. Am I right?
Right.
I think, Tara, the categories you have, such as residential, commercial, and so forth, really don't have any meaning other than to just help somebody find where this thing might be. So the fact that it's listed here in commercial, if you just said short-term rental offered, doesn't mean that it's not a home occupation or something like that. It's just that you listed it here for somebody's convenience to find. If your concern is because it's under commercial and therefore you've got it permitted and therefore you said over 90 days means it's commercial, but that's not really part of the ordinance at all. It's just a matter of categorizing it.
It is and it isn't, because you have home occupations listed under residential, and if it's under commercial, that's telling Chris and the owner that you need site plan review. So there's a benefit in my mind to having the commercial uses in this commercial section.
Okay.
I mean, that's easy enough to change between hearings too, or, that's,
Right.
that kind of thing's not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just for,
You gotta go into this assuming that you want 2 hearings, so.
yes. Yeah. So for the sake of now, we just move forward as it is.
All right, and then the next thing would be in the home occupation section. And I'll admit, I mean, as I said when we started out, there was no perfect way to organize this because we're talking about business use of a home. So, I couldn't find a clean, easy way to do it. And if you look at like a couple that some other towns have done, they're just so long and complicated. Yeah, I don't like to go that route. So we're in the home occupation part, and are clarifying that these 2 things from your matrix are home occupations.
Right. That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
I wonder. I'll think about this, not this week, but whether there's any way to have this as an appendix. But I'm a little bit nervous about that too. I'd really rather have it be a separate handout that just has the section numbers in the ordinance.
I think the height person would just like a handout.
Yeah.
It's cleaner, easier to understand, and then with references to where to look if they want to pursue it more deeply.
Right. If you want to do this, here's what you need.
Right. Okay.
That's it, except for one other place later on that I changed hotel to lodging. But wait, down here, this is that new clarification of when you need a zoning permit for home occupation.
Do we need a permit for any home occupation?
It hasn't been clear. It wasn't stated that you do.
But it would make Chris's job easier if there were.
Yeah, there really wasn't any way to, make sure that these other requirements were met, like about, that the parking was okay and it wasn't gonna have noise or after storage or whatnot.
Sorry.
Because visitors, clients, right.
I was just trying to cover everybody that might be coming, except for an occasional delivery vehicle.
Right.
And this also gives Chris the opportunity to make sure the life safety code is followed. Whether it's employees or visitors staying in a guest room. You need to make sure they have a fire extinguisher and whatnot.
I mean, the key here is home occupation. I see it as caps in my head. It's a category, right?
And I won't bother scrolling to there, but in the parking table, I changed public accommodation, hotels, motels, and lodges to lodging facility, so we're consistent.
Okay. Well, it looks like it reflects everything we've been talking about in the chart.
Okay.
So should we take a vote as to whether or not we want to move this forward to a public hearing?
Yes?
We should take a
Alright.
vote. Yes, I agree.
Okay, so this would be, whether, well, why don't I entertain a motion to that effect then?
This is Rich. Rita, I move that we vote to approve the conceptual table that we discussed today and the associated language changes to the zoning regulations for a public discussion on December 9th of 2020.
Second motion.
Okay, all those in favor will go through alphabetically with who's left. Bill Larson,
He's muted.
So I'm in favor.
okay. Wendy Rathgaber, yes. John,
Yes,
Rich,
Yes?
Bill Spence,
Yes.
Terry,
I guess I'm in favor of it going to public hearing. I'm certainly not in favor of all the parts of it.
right, no, we're just voting to move it to public hearing or not. So everyone's in favor of moving it to public hearing, which would be Wednesday evening, December 9th.
yes.
So,
Is it at 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
so what I'll do is write it in zoning amendment form, which would describe the changes in the ordinance and a notice, and get that to Mark before Friday.
Okay. And tell your friends. Let's make sure that we have some involvement here, because there are a lot of moving parts, and we want to make sure that,
Oh, yes.
you know,
Yeah.
that we do this appropriately.
And that if you do it, it's clear.
Yes,
Or maybe somebody has a suggestion, maybe somebody who comes to the hearing will have a suggestion for how we can make something clear.
exactly.
Is this going to be, Wendy, we're planning this to be a Zoom public hearing, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term?
Yes.
So people won't be able to throw things at us,
I'll be sending Mark.
at least not hit us.
I'll be sending Mark the link in the hearing notice, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to circle back to or touch on in regards to transient rentals?
Right,
If
Madam Chairman, we move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that, if it's a
All right.
motion.
Oh, yes.
All those in favor, Bill Larson,
He's already adjourned.
Nope, he's just muted. You're
He's
muted. We can't go until you vote.
You can lip read.
You're still muted.
I'm in favor of adjourning.
Wendy, yes. John,
Yes.
Rich,
Aye.
Bill Spence,
Yes, ma'am.
Terry.
Aye.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.
Thanks,
Madam
everybody.
Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay.